Welcome back to the JV Speaks podcast. Yeah, it's been a minute. John, what happened? I mean, we were rolling pretty strong, and I think we just had a crazy busy year, man. But I think it's always good to be, gentle with yours and not stress yourself out. We did this podcast mainly because we just wanted to share information, and we kind of hit a super busy season, and some times went by, but we're back. We have 3 more powerful episodes coming up before we close out season 2 and close out 2022. So with that being said, today's episode kind of, I guess, hits home for John and I on a stance of just, staying inspired on a daily basis. I think we're in an industry where, we always get those people that come to us and they're like, how do you guys stay creative 24/7? How do you manage, to always be in the flow and be creative and make videos? And, a short answer to that is we're not always inspired. John, what are your thoughts on that topic?
I think it all comes down to not forcing creativity or inspiration. I think that, this is one of my favorite topics to talk about because life is a big ebb and flow. It's not always sunny. There's sometimes rainy days. There's sometimes some clouds, so it's taking those days and mixing it with the good ones, but understanding that, you have to look at it from, a wider perspective and understand, if today's a little tough for me to get moving, well, let's look back at the past 6 months. Like, you were just in grind mode for, so long. So, being gentle on yourself, cutting yourself a little slack. But I think the biggest thing that I could say is that, when inspiration comes, it suddenly strikes.
Yeah, I agree. And I think when it does strike, you run with it. I also think when you're feeling kind of a lull, the weather's changing, at least for people that live in the Midwest, you know how it is. Winter comes, it gets cold, everyone kind of hibernates, as they say. But I think it's an advantage to kind of tap back into kind of yourself, right? Like, personally, when I'm feeling, not as inspired as I normally do, maybe middle of the year, summer, it's super hot out, I'm feeling good. I always think to myself, like, what did I do when I was younger? And this is personally just kind of what works for me, right? So when I was younger, before anything, any job existed, having to make money, any work stresses and just day-to-day, tasks, thinking those completely aside, what did I do? And that was, I played. I was an athlete growing up. So, in those moments that I'm feeling, not as inspired, I kind of just put that all aside. I'm not going to work today. And I find an outlet to kind of relive that childhood that made me happy, right? And now where I'm at in my life and, the things I'm doing that do help that is, I started playing ice hockey last year. It's been about 11 months now. I've been going strong at this one sport I'd never played, but to the core of it, it's competition. That's what got me thriving when I was younger. So to be able to get on ice, all your thoughts go away. You're just so present in that. And then the other side is kiteboarding for me. That really helped. And now I kind of rejoined back at a gym, working out with my wife, and we're just kind of staying on a schedule that keeps us motivated, keeps us on, a regimen that works. And what I always find that the more I do that, I guess the more I take time to play, the more excited I am to get back into my work. So it's kind of a weird balance, but for me personally, it works. I mean, John, what would you say works best for you when you're kind of just feeling, not in the flow?
Well, for me, what happens when, you kind of hit that lull. Well, at first you realize that, you've been going. Then when you stop, it's just this moment where you're like, whoa, I don't feel right, or like something's not right. And so, for me, I always look at that, and it takes me a little bit to kind of catch it and to realize it. But then I go inward. I think for you, you're more extroverted in your even when you were younger, you've always played, sports and you were very competition based. For me, I was very inward. I'm a musician, played music and did a lot of writing and stuff. And so for me, when it's busy season, I'm not as likely to stay in my meditation practice or reading books or writing or playing guitar. But then all of a sudden, when all this space opens up, I'm like, okay, where do I turn now? Yeah, and for me, I turn to music. I do a lot of house projects. I like building things and kind of doing some renovations. I recently just finished building an ice bath. So that ice bath took me like, I started it back in July. I finally just finished it just because I've been so busy. So now it's like, okay, cool. Finally have some time to work on some me stuff. And at first, yeah, you feel a little guilty because you're like, oh, I'm not used to having this much personal time. But I think that's just the perk of our industry. And I think when you understand it, then you don't have to feel guilty about it. Have you ever felt that, Vince, where you're working so hard, and then all of a sudden you just have all this time for you, like, oh, wow, I have time for me. Did you ever feel guilty about taking personal time?
Definitely. Definitely getting better at it, though. I think, now kind of just getting married and having a house to take care of, there's been always something, a task always to do. But yeah, I love the job we chose to do. I'm very passionate about it. So yeah, it definitely feels like you kind of got stabbed when things kind of slow down. But, honestly, the last month or two, having some time off, I don't know, I personally started to like it more than kind of being swamped. I feel like when you're super busy, it's great. You're kind of just like running around crazy. You have this shoot, and then the next day you're prepping for this shoot to prep for a shoot in 2 weeks. It's like, I don't know, I think when you look at like your business, you always want to make sure, A, you're doing the work you love, you're going down the lane you wanted to go. And I feel like when you're super busy, it kind of, you have really no time to sit back and think like, is this the right work I want to be doing? So these last 2 months for me, kind of being, more in the back seat, kind of closing up a lot of big projects that we've had in production and wrapping everything up, I've kind of opened up a whole new like headspace to just like, I don't know, re-strategize JV, do some back end stuff like updating a website, getting the reel together. I think having time off and having that balance really allows you to see things from a bigger picture than just like being so lost in the work. I remember when I was younger, when we were like back in Chicago, I remember just like being super busy was like seen as like being super successful. And of course, yeah, people see that. And from an outside perspective, of course, it's going to look like that. But I think the more you can kind of, be busy, even when it's not for a client, be busy for yourself. That's when you start to really find the things in your business that, maybe you didn't have the time to look back on. I mean, I know we have some exciting things that we'll be touching on in the last episode about looking ahead. I won't get too far ahead. But, seeing where 2022 has come, I'm super proud of kind of what we did this year. And, I'm going to take Q4 to kind of just, again, take on projects that we want to do, but also just take some time to play, take some time for family, holidays, not be guilty. And what's always happens is it comes back full circle. It comes back tenfold. Like the more time you give to yourself, clients, it's just like, it's a whirlwind.
Yeah. I mean, I think it all comes down to filling your cup, And speaking of filling your cup, before I get into that, what are you sipping on over there?
Right now, this episode is fueled by Yerba Mate Enlightenment, currently sipping on a cold, tall can. What about you? I see you got a little coffee cup.
I got a little chai latte from Forte.
Nice.
So that's kind of what's filling my cup this morning, but on the big picture here, by the way, I love Yerba Mate, it's amazing. What's filling my cup recently is it's introspection, but if you have, you think about your year and you don't have this time to refill and like get your spirit in line, I know our season is gonna kick back up, and we got some stuff coming up in February already. It's like if you don't have that time to refill your cup, like for me, I'm like, how are you gonna keep going, And I think, as I get older in life and I have a family, I have a kid, there's a lot of balance, like giving to yourself, I think is huge, and something I've actually been doing, and I encourage everyone listening to do it, is visualizing goals. Something I did way back in the beginning of JV was I did a dream board. And you may have done one with me, but this is something I've done through my meditation practice. And it's the idea of sitting in meditation and writing out, what you want to bring into your life in a week, in a day, in a month, in 10 years. And then you write them all down. And then what I do is I'll go and I'll find images that correlate with what I wrote down. So I recently had a minute and a moment to, I had a lot of change come up in my life. So I had a cork board that was filled with pre-production sheets that are now done. So I threw them all away. So I'm looking at an empty cork board, and I'm looking at an empty whiteboard because I've moved everything digitally. And so I'm like, okay, well, what can I fill this with? And so, I visualize and I put on there my goals and my aspirations and my dream car and my dream house and things that I work towards. Because I think, just like when you go hunting or you're doing target practice, how do you know what you're aiming at if there's no target? And so I think that's on a personal level, that's important. And also on a business level, it's important. If me and you don't have the time because we're just in the weeds working and taking gigs left and right, going, but we don't have a target that we're aiming at, well, then you're getting pulled that way, I'm getting pulled this way, and our target's in front of us. And, taking that moment to dial in and being patient, I think that's the whole idea of, the benefit of taking a little time to just slow down and recalibrate,
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head of that. No, I feel like I remember back in the day when early JV days, you did that vision board, and looking back, it's like we hit it all. We put a goal amount that we wanted to, in revenue we wanted to hit. We wanted to get a space, all that. I remember that day you did it, so I'm excited because I'm not going to share what's on your board now, but I personally saw it in all good things, I know they will come with time, but I don't want to, jinx. But I think a lot of it's just like, you need time to really speak those ideas into existence. And I think, it's fun to kind of bounce off people. It's fun to shoot for the stars and really just kind of like say things that like you think are so far out of reach, but like chances are they will come with time. So yeah, no, I think it's just important. I think as we learn more about just this industry and how it works, it really is, I feel like a cycle of life, at least for us, for JV. It's like, as the warmer weather hits, people feel better. They're inclined to feel creative, but it's like, how can we stay creative in these months that just feel slower? The world's slowing down, the leaves are falling, and the trees, it's like there's still beauty even though everything's dying. And so it's like, for me, I personally have been chasing just balance, life, like I am more active than I ever been since high school. And I remember when I lived in Chicago, all I did was work. And I still love that grind. I love driving into Chicago and you hit off the Skyway, you feel this pulse of like creativity, but to be so removed from that scene and to see like when we lived in Chicago, I remember like, I just like didn't do any, like to look back at how active I am now in sports I'm involved in. I'm going in the water, I'm on the ice rink, I'm in the gym. Like to look back, I'm like, what did I do in Chicago when I was not working? And I'll never forget, and those, if you are listening, like, remember we did that JV Studios volleyball team with Chicago Sport and Social? Yeah. One of our clients, we signed up for like a winter, just to keep the crew morale high. We did a winter volleyball group. And it was a winter thing, and I'll never forget. It was like every Monday we played up north, and it was like just the best. Like cool. Everyone had so much fun. All these creatives that are doing their awesome stuff. Like we put on the high shorts and high socks. We got second place. Yeah, and we showed in, and like that sense of competition, like it raised morale so high that I feel like everyone was just so recharged. And I just encourage people that maybe, they have it inside them to just to seek outside just the job you're doing, because it'll fulfill you in ways that are just, it's not just for your job. And then I think in turn, you're excited to get back to your job.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, a good quote is, when life gets hard, push harder. When things get tough, push harder, lean into the things that you love, Something I've been really leaning into is faith, My faith has grown tremendously, and it's just understanding that, like, yeah, when things get tough, that you just got to keep pushing, and and diving deep inwards and figuring out what works. And yeah, and if you're a competition, like if that's something that speaks to you, that's amazing. But there's other things too, like cooking and carpentry and reading books and writing. And so I think it really all depends on how each person is wired, because for me, like, I personally know competition doesn't push me as much as it pushes you, What really pushes me is it's kind of unwinding my mind, I really just keep going to that because I love it. Vince, question I have for you, because I've definitely seen a big change for you, especially since you've been married and since you've been kind of balancing out yourself more. Like, what does like a positive mindset or like even positive affirmation, self-talk, like the way that you speak, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, it's a good question. You always told me growing up, like, you are your thoughts, So it's true, like, what you say, you will become. So if you are, oh, I'm uninspired, I'm on this, you'll just continue to be uninspired, right? So I think words are powerful, and I realize them the more, I think, as I'm getting older. And just the words you use to others, I think there's a certain language of just like how to kind of get what you want in the right way, but also, being a better listener. I think that's something I'm always pushing for each and every day. But to kind of go back, staying positive is just something. It's not easy, and I think it's tossed around like it is, like, oh, just stay positive, and I've thrown it around to my partner, and but it's so easy to get in your head. I always like to think that everyone is pushing for other people's greatness, but sometimes it kind of comes across. It can come across as envy, jealousy, bitterness. Maybe you see someone doing something or saying. Maybe you see someone from the outside that looks busier than you, right? And it's easy to get in your head. I'm a failure, or I'm not as busy, or man, they passed me. Competition, and I've been there, and I still get there where you get in your head. Maybe you're on Instagram, you get lost in a wormhole checking other people out, and you just see them grinding, and you're like, man, like, we're failing. But just telling yourself, like, hey, you're on your own journey, you're on your own path. And I think, John, you've always kind of engraved that in me, is just like mindset's everything. And even our one good buddy from Nashville, Blaine, going back to what he always says, be a light to people that, otherwise they need to be bright. John, I know you could probably speak more on that, but
yeah, in a dark room, one little piece of light can illuminate it, And so I think, the world is filled with a lot of darkness. It's filled with a lot of envy. It's filled with a lot of judgment and jealousy, and it's difficult to be a light. It's a challenge to be a light, and so I think that taking that medicine of, like, when life gets tough, or when you even talk about, forget going, being so wide, let's bring it inward into our own mind, like your mind gets dark, seasonal depression, it's here, welcome. And just understanding that all you have to do is just get a little light, a little positivity, a little hope, some gratitude. You get that, you turn that switch on, and turn off everything else of the lower vibrations, the negative words, the self-doubt, the lack of confidence, and you're sitting there, and maybe you're finding yourself scrolling on social media. Maybe you've found yourself in a wormhole and you're on social media and you're listening to this podcast, right? It happens. It happens to me all the time. I'm not perfect. But maybe this right here after this podcast, you get up and you go do it. You wanted to go and run that mile, go do it. You wanted to go do 50 push-ups, go do it. You wanted to go and, enjoy life and go for a walk, just do it.
yeah, I think setting mini goals and little victories add up too, just to kind of build to the inspiration. Because I mean, if there was someone out there that felt inspired every day, we'd have to make sure they're human because it's so common. But I think it's okay to just not be inspired, to not feel moments of inspiration, but to still have a positive outlook. You know, like that's why we're called artists. You know, it's like, you know, there's people that you need time away from the art to get back even harder into the art, you know? And so as we close this episode up, really just want to kind of get the message across, like, does inspiration strike 24/7, 365 days a year? Not for me, John. I mean, for you?
No.
You know, I mean,
I wish. But also, yeah, it's the balance of it, you know? Darkness needs light, light needs darkness, busyness needs calmness, you know?
And I think, you know, as a takeaway is like when you, maybe if you are feeling not completely inspired or you're just not in the zone, I guess, or in the flow as we call it here, it's all right. Take some time for you. Reach out to people that bring you back into that flow. If it's mentors, you know, I actually recently reached out to someone, a director that I constantly stay in touch with, and we're actually speaking today. Just catching up, you know, seeing what he's been working on, and vice versa. And it's really just to kind of stay in the flow and hopefully gain some inspiration from the conversation, right? I think there's something about just being, you know, honest with yourself and not just being hard on yourself. But on that note, thanks for listening. Thanks for tuning in. We got 2 more episodes left for you for season 2. Thanks for riding this journey with us and being patient. I know we had a lull on the latest episodes, but again,
Yeah, it's all a flow. So you guys have a great day and continue to be that light.